Hello friends, this is Rahul. Let's simply learn robotic process automation with UiPath. In today's video, we will see integration between UiPath and SharePoint using Azure App Registration, using basically App ID and the secret key. Okay, the first step is here to create the App ID in create the App ID in Azure Active Directory and the App Registration. So let me just navigate onto the portal.azure.com. Here I'm navigating into the Azure Active Directory, and under Active Directory I have app registration. Yeah, so here basically we can create a app registration. So I have already created these two uh, app registration here. One is admin app having the full control, and another is the test site having the restricted control. So let me just show you basically what type of permission that we have given here for the admin app and for the test site app. So I'm clicking on this particular admin app, and here you can see this is the app ID, this is the tenant ID, and we have created a secret ID under the secret ID. Okay, so now going back to this permission. So API, I'm moving on to the API permission, and here you can see I have provided the permission for admin app is site.full control, which means this particular admin uh, app registration having the complete control or complete access to the SharePoint sites. Let's say I have a SharePoint, and under that I have multiple sites. So this particular app having the access to the multiple sites. So this is what the admin apps we have created. Now moving on to the another app that we have created, or app ID that we have created, that is something test site. So this is something the restricted one. So here is also we have a app ID, then tenant ID, and the secret key that we have created under the client credential. Okay, so here also we have provided the access, but that is something the restricted access, not a complete access. Okay, let's move on to the API permission. Under that you can see it is only a site.selected, which means we restricted this particular app uh, to only access to the specific site, not the other sites. Okay, so so basically if I show you the add permission, and if I go to the graph, Microsoft graph, then here basically there are two options: delegated permissions and the application permission. Here in both of the cases, both of the app registration that we have created having the application level permission, not a delegated permission. Basically delegated permission is used for the user specific. Okay, suppose user want to access, and basically we have to delegate that permission to that specific users, but here we are using application permissions. If I click on the application permissions and I type site, then you can see we have multiple permission, but for this particular app registration, that is test site that we have created for our testing purpose, that we have provided only site.selected. So which means it is something the restricted access. Yeah, so this is what the case that is having. Another point that here grant admin consent for the, so basically whenever you are creating the app registration, you must have to provide a grant admin consent. Here you can see we have provided a grant admin consent here, otherwise you will get an error. So this is the step basically that we have created. The one is admin app having the full control, and another is the test site app having the restricted control. And now in the next step, basically we are mapping this test site app details or test site app ID with the our particular test site 2, where basically we want to integrate. Okay, and where we want to basically upload and download the file, okay, with the help of UiPath. Now basically I am moving on to the next step, that is something generating the access token using the Microsoft graph API in the Postman using the Postman. And again, so basically we have a few graph API calls that we are using here. Okay, so first call is basically generating the access token. Second call is basically generate get the site ID. Okay, and third step is basically provide the read write permission to the site ID. Okay, so for that I have used the Postman, and I have basically created the basically provided these API calls in the Postman, and then we have basically we have done these particular steps. Okay, so generate the access token. So first step is generate the access token. Okay, so generate the access token. For that we have used this particular API call, and here you can see directory tenant ID. That is something we have to pass, and this is something you will be getting from the Azure App Registration. Okay, so now again here we are to generating the access token, we are using the admin app. Whatever admin app that we have created, that admin app having the full control. So we just created the access token with the full control, and that admin app basically will help us to mapping the site ID and test site app ID that we have created. Okay, so now I'm moving on to the admin app here, and here basically the API call, and here we are passing the, as I mentioned here, directory that tenant ID. Okay, this is a tenant ID, and you can see this tenant ID is 7180 something, and the similar tenant ID that I have passed, and this is the complete, let's say, API call, and the method would be the post here. And again that we have passed few details here. One is the client ID. That client ID is something that we have created here, that is something the app ID. And again the client secret key, so client secret key is created under this particular, you will get this client secret key under this particular section. And we have passed few grant let's say key and the values, that is something grant type and scope. This is what the grant type and scope. Yeah, so let me see anything in the header. No, nothing is in the header, only we have passed in the body, and body should be form URL encoded. Okay, let me just run this. Yeah, so our call is successful. We receive the successful response, and we have generated the access token with the help of admin app. Okay, so I will just copy this particular access token, and I will use this access token to the next step. Okay, next step, which where basically we are fetching the site ID. And for this particular access token, we have under header we have one key, basically authorization, and that's something authorization. Under authorization we have a value bearer space that particular access token that we have passed here. And the call is here again the get site ID, where the call is basically the is something Microsoft Graph API hostname and the server relative path. Now hostname and server relative path, from where we'll get to know. Okay, that will let you know. So you can see this is again the get call, and we have this particular graph API that we used, and the call is here. This basically the server name that here is referring, sorry, the host name and server relative path. The host name is this particular our site name. So if you go on to this particular SharePoint site, and you can see whatever your host name, this is the host name, and the server relative path. So server relative path is the server relative path. Server relative path is nothing but the site.test2. Okay, so this is our server relative path for that particular site, and the same that I have used here. Okay, so this is the relative path, and this is the host name, and here I have just passed authorization and the bearer token whatever we have received, and that is generated by the admin app. Now let me run this. Yeah, So you can see we receive the successful response. Okay, and now you can see we have received the successful response and we receive some ID here. Okay, so middle one, whatever is there, this is something the site ID for this particular this particular respective site ID, I can say. Okay, so now this is a step that where we are basically receive or get the site ID, and this particular site ID again we are using for our third call. Okay, so where basically we are providing the permission. Okay, under that particular call, under that particular graph API call, here the site ID and then permission. So you can see 3D A1, this is something the app ID, site ID that we have received, and then the same I have passed here in the API call. Now the next step is basically to provide the permission. Now whatever uh, token that we have generated in the generate access token call, the same we are using here, and under header we have basically providing two different types of keys. One is content type, that is something application slash JSON, and another is something authorization, again the bearer and the access token. Okay, that we have passed here. And another point is definitely, as I explained, we have to pass site ID here in the API call. And again the method is here post. Now the next step is we have to provide the body, provide the details in the body section, and again here body is something raw. So this is something the JSON format of that particular body. So here we are providing the roles as read and write, and the again which application that we need to map here. Then we have provided here the test site, the app test site that we have created in the Azure. Okay, so basically we are mapping yeah, so basically we are mapping this test site credentials or test site details with this particular SharePoint site. Okay, whatever test site to SharePoint we have created, that's something mapping basically we are doing it here. Okay, so now the app ID is here basically. The app ID is here, whatever app ID that we have created. This is the app ID, that 5F4D something. Okay, and the display name. So these are the few parameters I can say, the values of this ID key and the display key that we have to pass the value here. One is the ID and another is the display name. Display name is nothing but this is the display name that we have created in the Azure. Okay, so these two parameters that we have field that or value we have to pass is here, which means whatever site ID we have basically fetched, thus that site ID, okay, will map with this particular app ID or this particular test site app registration, whatever we have created in the Azure. So this mapping that we are doing it here. Now I will just send a request. Yeah, and you can see we received the successful response. Okay, so successful response, and under that successful response you can see the ID is getting generated, and basically we provided the permissions. Okay, this is something the successful response that we have, so which means the permission has been granted to that particular site ID and mapping has been done. Okay, in a simple way we can say. Now this is the first step, or this is the prior step. Moving on to the UiPath, I can say. So what we have done, we have basically first created the app IDs, app registration in the Azure, and basically map the app registration, whatever we have created, restricted app registration, that is test site, with the test site too. Okay, now the next step is basically create a workflow in the UiPath using the Microsoft Office 365 activities. Okay, and then you can go with the upload and download the files in the SharePoint. Yeah, so moving on to the UiPath now. Okay, so I have already created the workflow in the UiPath basically. Okay, and as I mentioned, we are using UiPath.Microsoft Office 365.activities. So you can basically download these activities in using manage package. Here you can go all packages and you can search it here. The library, or let's say a package will be appear there, and you can add that dependency. Okay, so to upload, so basically this is the first of all workflow that we have created for the download the file. Okay, so you to use okay, once before that let me show you whatever integrations Microsoft Office 365 and files. So basically these are the activity that will be used for the anything we want to create interact with the SharePoint. In this case, basically we are downloading in this particular workflow we are downloading the file from the SharePoint, which means we are using two activities. One of basically first activity should be the Microsoft scope. Everything is under the Office 365 Microsoft scope, and then find files and folder, and then download files. Okay, so these are the activities that we are going to use. Okay, now the case is here, for Microsoft Office 365 scope we have to provide few details. Okay, few properties I can say we need to fill it. One is something application secret key, application ID, then tenant ID, definitely service would be files and share, that we will be selected here, and authentication type is again here application ID and a secret key. We have a multiple options available under authentication type, but specifically we are using application ID and secret key because we are going to use application ID and a secret key. Okay, so yeah, so far this is what we have here. So I have just created the arguments, or let's say a variable here, and I have kept all the values I can say here. Now you can see the tenant ID. So tenant ID, which tenant ID and which application ID and application secret key we are going to use, that I will show you. So basically in the first step, basically we have done the mapping between this test site 2 and this test site app registration, that whatever app ID or app registration that we have created here. Okay, so now these particular details we will be going to use. Okay, here you can see the client ID that I have passed is here, app ID that I have passed is here 54, which is related to this particular test site app registration that we have created. The another is something the tenant is again I have passed is here tenant in the tenant ID, and third one is the application secret key. So this is something the application secret key that I have basically provided whatever generated in the client credentials in the Azure. Okay, and the remaining field, that is something I have that will be going to use for the next step. Okay, so in the next step basically what I have done is here, first of all we have created a local path, and under that local path basically we have provided the local path plus the SharePoint site name. So this is the local path, and this is the SharePoint, this is the SharePoint site. That is something simple integration that we have created. And another point, that the next step that we are finding the files and the folders. Under that basically we are providing few parameters or few properties we can fill here. One is something the SharePoint file name, so which file basically we want to download from the SharePoint. Another thing is subfolder is nothing but where exactly that file is located. Now if I can show you here, I have created one subfolder variable SharePoint folder path. So basically SharePoint folder path, here I have given test1 and subfolder. So if I navigate onto this particular one, so right now we are in the document is nothing but something, this is the root directory. Under that root directory we have basically or a drive name, we can consider it's a root directory or a drive name, and under that we have a folder test1, and under that we have again another folder called subfolder, and that is what the path basically we have provided this is the under the subfolder. Okay, now what exactly we are getting here? So basically we have the output called drive item, and basically in the again there are two more options, or two more properties are there, where we have to provide a drive name and the site URL. Okay, so again the same drive name and site URL we have passed. Drive name is nothing but the documents. It is something the root directory, whatever I have shown you here. This is the root directory. Okay, and the site URL is nothing but the test site 2. Okay, so whatever test site 2 that we have created, this is the path is site/test site 2. Okay, so this is the site URL. Okay, now we are good to go. So here basically we are just checking some condition. If the drive item is nothing, let's say if we will getting the null, then probably we will throw an exception, the file is not present to that specific folder. Okay, and if file is found, then it will simply download the file. So it is simple check. Basically if file is found, then it will download. If file is not found, then it will throw the exception. That is what the case. Okay, now basically you can see here there is config.xls file is present under this particular test1 subfolder. Okay, and I'm downloading that particular file in my yeah. So this is the particular download path. Yeah, so this is the download file. You can see there is no file available, config.xls. Okay, now this is the workflow that we have designed for downloading the files from the SharePoint. And let me execute this and see, we'll see the result. Yeah, it is moving on to the file found, because whatever file that we are expected here in argument, that config.xls that we are expected, and the config.xls file is available, and hence it is, you can see, let me refresh this, and hey, you can see the file is downloaded. Okay, so this is what the case, or this is what the way that we can basically download it, the file. Okay, and now the another part is basically upload the file. Okay, for uploading as well, we have to use that something, the Microsoft Office 365 scope, and then basically we have to again search files and folders. Basically that will be helpful for us on which folder or on which location that we need to upload the file. And similarly then basically we will basically use the get info and then upload the file, get item info. Okay, and then upload the file. So let me show you again the same parameter that we have passed here. Okay, the application secret key, the application ID, then authentication type is again app ID and secret key, then again the services is files and shared, tenant ID that we have passed. Okay, so these are the parameters that we have passed. We have kept it blank here because we are not using username password, we are using application ID and secret key. Okay, again I will show you the argument. Argument is it would be the similar, whatever tenant ID that we have created for the test site, where yeah, this is the test site, and this is something the tenant ID that you can see, and again this is something the app ID. App ID is again, you can see 5F4D0, and the secret key, again the secret key that you will be getting here. Okay, so this is what the secret key, again drive name that we have passed. Okay, because our root directory or drive is the documents. Okay, that's what we have passed it here. And the local file path, basically where basically we have to download that particular file. So this particular file that we will be downloading here, and then the folder path. Okay, basically where exactly that folder is available. Yeah, sorry, basically this is something upload one, so that's what I have provided the file path. So this is what the file path with the complete file name and the extension. And another thing is where exactly we want to upload this particular file onto the SharePoint. Okay, so this is what the location, in this location test subfolder 1, here we have to upload this file. The file is something temp file.xls. So this is what the file that we need to upload it. Okay, so again the similar case, we have basically created the finds files and folder. Here basically we have passed the folder path. Okay, folder path is nothing but this particular uh, folder path, that is slash subfolder, and again the output would be the drive item, and again here we have provided a drive name and the site URL. Site URL is nothing but our test site 2, whatever is that we have created, and the drive name is nothing but the documents. Okay, so this is what our drive name. Okay, so now I will again check here. Let's say if suppose this particular folder is containing some files, then definitely it will check, and then accordingly it will move on to the particular else part. And then if SharePoint folder path is not empty, then basically it will moving on this particular location, and then it will basically fetch the get item info with drive item dot parent reference dot id. This is what the we have used, and again the similar drive name and the URL that we have passed, and item is the drive item, whatever is output that we have received or we have basically fetched from these particular files, find files and the folders. Okay, once we receive the this particular drive item, basically we are again passing the drive item and the local files and path, this particular location, so file path location where basically our local file is available, and then it will upload into that particular location. Okay, so let me just execute this particular flow. Yes, so you can see our workflow is executed successfully, and let me go on to the test site 2, and let me show you basically, let me refresh. Yeah, and you can see temp file.xls a few seconds ago updated by, and the main thing is once we you can see the modified by the SharePoint app, something like that, which means this is something uploaded by the automation. Okay, the workflow that we have created in the UiPath. Yeah, so basically in this way you can upload or download the file in the SharePoint with the help of the Azure the application ID and secret key created in the Azure. Okay, and again basically here is one of the way that we can restrict, okay, restrict the respective test ID, means basically site SharePoint site, or let's say credentials that we have created, or the application registration that we have created, by providing the restricted permission, and we can restrict it to the access. Let's say in this example, in this particular use case, or let's say an example, we have provided a restricted access that it's test site 2, uh, whatever app registration that we have created, that is site test site, which is only accessible for the test site 2. It won't access to the other site. Let's say we have a test site 3, 4, 5, something like that sites is available, then definitely this credential, whatever we have created test site, would not be accessible those particular site. Okay, and another point you have mentioned, we have created some two app ID. Definitely this admin app something only accessible to the admin guys, or let's say IT guys having the full control or authority, and test site whatever created these particular credentials of app ID or secret key, this is something the shareable to the development team where basically they want to integrate it. Okay, so this is what the purpose to create the mm, uh, two different app registration in the Azure app. I hope this is really useful in your let's say day-to-day activity, or let's say if suppose you are going to do some integration between SharePoint and the UiPath in the restricted manner. Definitely this will helpful to you guys. Yeah, that's it in this video. Thanks for watching, and in case you have any question, please comment.